Welcome everybody who's here today to join us for what is sure to be a great faculty panel discussion about fostering student engagement in online courses. I am Dr. Allison Boyer. I am the director of the new Center for Teaching and Learning here at Collin College, and this is the third in a series of webinars focusing on online teaching. We're really lucky to have some wonderful faculty members here today to share some of their own experiences and their expertise in teaching online and getting their students really actively involved and engaged with the material. For those of you who are just now joining, I want to ask that you mute your mics during the discussion and turn off your video as well so we can preserve bandwidth. I will be monitoring the chats, so if you have questions, feel free to post it there, and I will make sure our panelists are aware of those questions as best I can. But also know that I will preserve maybe 10 minutes or so at the end of our time for a Q&A session with our speakers. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, maybe ask for some quick introductions for the group, if you don't mind. Mindy, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Mindy Bailey, and I teach humanities at the Frisco campus. And I've been with the college for a very long time. I was an associate, an adjunct now, for 7 years, I think, before I became full-time. And I became full-time in 2004, and I've been teaching online since then. So I've seen this from a lot of different directions. I've worked on all the campuses, and so nice to see everybody today.
Thanks, Mindy.
Good morning. Yes, good morning. My name is Deborah Cardenas, and I teach biology, and I office at the Plano campus. I've also been around quite a few years, since in 1995 at Collin, and I started teaching online, if my memory serves me right, at about 2000, 2001, when we first launched our first online courses.
Oh, thank you, Deborah. Megan?
Hello, my name is Megan Cardwell Wilson, and I'm a dance professor at the Frisco campus. I joined Collin College 12 years ago and started teaching online in graduate school, and then took a break for several years and returned to online learning a few years ago.
Thank you. And Pam?
Hi, my name is Pam Gator. I teach sociology. In the fall, I will be teaching sociology on the Wiley campus. I've taught on the Plano campus and the McKinney campus, and of course at the Frisco campus. I started teaching what was called telecourse classes a long time ago, before I started teaching online classes. So it's been a while. I've been with the college almost 30 years, and we've gone through all of the learning platforms, Blackboard, WebCT, Canvas, whatever it is, you know, so it's a constant learning process. So I'm just glad to be here among this distinguished panel.
Well, we are so grateful to have all of you here. I know that from a lot of the feedback that I've read from faculty and just things that I've heard, I know that this engagement piece is for some the hardest thing to figure out when it comes to teaching online. And it's obviously became more important than ever when we were all forced to go online in the spring, whether we wanted to or not, and maybe without the ability to really plan as much as we would like. So I think this is going to be really beneficial for all of us here today to listen to this discussion. So I think I'd like to start by asking you all first, what are your primary goals and considerations when thinking about and determining how best to engage your students online? You all come from very diverse disciplines, so I think it'll be really interesting to hear about the different kinds of things that you think about.
I'll start. My goal is always that it be related to the subject matter that we're looking at that semester. And then a consideration that I always have in mind is that it also be relevant to the students. And right now with COVID and science, well, there are many possibilities of relating what is going on with things that they're interested in and it's relevant to them. We'll talk about antibody testing, or we'll talk about a testing of the virus. What are the differences? And they are very engaged because they are living, you know, this pandemic.
Absolutely.
And I want to follow up with what Deborah said, because it all depends on the course. I teach social problems as well as minority studies. And so I too like to present more than just context. I want to present application. So my primary goal and consideration for each class is whether it's a subject, whether it's a social problems class, what social problems are manifest as a result of COVID, racial injustice, or even the minority studies class. I want to consider how a controversial and sensitive topic can be addressed with every voice being heard respectfully and appropriately. So those are things that I consider.
Absolutely.
And dovetailing off of that, I think the multiple perspectives at the heart of all of this is the beauty of online teaching. In a classroom, you may get 2 or 3 people who are very active and some who, you know, kind of stumble in sometimes, but more and more in face-to-face classes, I find that people are scared to speak out and that they don't ask as many questions and all of that. So I think that that is part of the beauty of online classes. So having that as the primary goal is to get all of the voices singing in the choir, for me, is where I start. But I also want them to feel like they have skin in the game, you know, that it's not just me top down. I want it bottom up. So part of what I think about is how to get them involved in the discussion. So instead of me generating all the questions, I sometimes have them generate these divergent questions and give them Bloom question stems so that we get higher order thinking instead of just this or that, you know, and teach them about divergent thinking and open-ended questions that would lead to good discussion and make it relevant, things that people will have life experience with that they can speak to. And to make sure, one of my primary goals is to really consider that digital divide, because I have a lot of students who are in rural areas, and if I have a lot of synchronous or if I'm using a lot of bandwidth, many of them are on family plans and they just don't have unlimited bandwidth. So I check into all of that before I set it up.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to think about. Megan, what about
in
you?
that vein, I also try to start my course from a very personal place. Many of you spoke about being relevant to students' lives, and as someone who works in dance, a great number of my students enter into dance appreciation courses maybe by chance, and so it takes a little bit of convincing for them to see how dance does connect to their own life, because they are movers. We are all movers in some capacity. And so I start the course from a really personal place. So before I layer on all of the important things about dance as an art form and historical concerns, I really try to get the students involved at a personal level. And then I feel like it's easier for them to make that jump to looking at what happens in a more dance-specific context. If first they could even find a general way in which movement relates to their own lives. And so that has been really helpful.
Thank you. Those are all such important things, I think, for all of us to think about. So I think that brings me to my next question, which is maybe what a lot of us are here for today, which is, what are some of your favorite, most successful strategies for getting your students engaged online? And kind of the second part of that question then is, why do you think they were so successful?
Well, I could start. What I do, especially for my online classes, is before the week before the semester starts, I send an email out to them telling them about a live orientation that I'm going to have in the evening. I tell them the time, and then it's 30 minutes. And really the orientation is optional, but I give extra credit for those who participate as another incentive. And the reason why I think it's successful, because it allows them an opportunity to ask questions about and I give it like towards the end of the first week. So they had a chance to look at the syllabus, to look at the assignments, to ask questions about the assignments. What are my specific expectations? And I want them to ask the questions so that others who may have the same question can hear. What I haven't been doing is recording it so that others can listen to it. And I think when we get into a question about tools to use, that's one of the things that I'm going to do in the future, because a lot of my online students, they either work or they're taking other classes during the day and so forth, so they miss that live orientation. However, I also provide a course overview, video recorded course overview, and it's just basically where you locate things, the assignments and modules. But my course orientation talks specifically about the class, about the assignments, about my expectations. So I found that to be successful, and I go back and I look at the students who have done well in the class and if they participated versus those who send me questions that I already have answered either in orientation or somewhere in my beginning module. So having that information there and having me there live provides a connection. So I'm not just another teacher, but I'm a face, you know, if they want to have that opportunity. So I find that connection to be successful.
Yeah, I think research definitely tells us that that human connection, putting a face on the instructor, is so important in helping students feel more comfortable in participating.
So I'll go next. I have kind of been on the fence about this when I first started doing it because it felt like maybe it was too personal, but I put together a music video of my life outside of all of that. And they get to meet my cats and they go through my garden and they see the fish and the eels and all of that. Because I think it gives them a feel for who I am and, you know, how much this kind of lives in my life. It's not just, you know, theory, this is real. But the other thing that I do is try to get them really to know each other at the very beginning. So I have this get to know me exercise. So I put up that Our House video that, you know, is Crosby, Stills and Nash, Our House, with, you know, 2 cats in the yard, and then I cross it out, I put 9. And then I do this discussion where I have them do just a 100-word brief bio intro, talking about your interests, your talents, you know, things that we should know about you that make you unique. And then they have an option. So part of what I do that I think gets them involved is the fact that I give them, you know, motivation, autonomy, and purpose to everything we do. So I call it mapping it out. So I just map it. So autonomy, when they have choices that they can make it, they can customize the class to work whatever is, you know, going to take them the furthest in their career and their lives. And, you know, it's humanities, so it's everything, right? So it's very different from other courses. So this get to know me exercise is just playful, but I get to know them and they get to know each other in ways that are just really interesting. So well, the first option is that you can either describe yourself from your pet's point of view and actually take on your pet's voice and personality and all of that to describe yourself. Right, so I'm going to tell them this is not about this is not getting to know your dog. This is about, you know, your dog's perception of you, because you're, you know, I think we're our best selves with our pets, and they say a lot about who we are. So that's an option. And then the second option is that they fill in the blank with, if I were a blank, I would be blank because. So the first one, so it's got, you know, color, if I were a color, if I were an appliance, if I were a tool, if I were a musical instrument. And I tell them, you know, be creative with it. So, you know, they'll say things like, if I were a color, I would be silver because I'm a reflection of all the people in my life. Or if, you know, if I were a musical instrument, I would be guitar because I'm always getting played, you know, things like that. So it's a really playful way. And then they're required to read and respond and make connections and, you know, comment on the wit of other people. 5 are required. And so if they do 10, then they get 5 bonus points. And if they do 20 or more, they get 10 bonus points. And then I read through them and then I comment and I make my connections with them all the way through. So that one takes a long time to grade. In the spring, I think I had 1,700 or so posts, but they're short and they're just, you know, but those connections I think go a really long way ultimately. And after that, you know, I put them into team discussions instead of having just one large discussion. So they connect.
We have one question in the chat for you. Susan Lafayette is asking if you do this in a discussion format. Like, how do you format all of this?
Yeah, it's a discussion board.
Okay, thank you.
And I usually leave it open longer than other people leave theirs open. I usually give them about a week in a 16-week session. I give them about a week to do the first part and then a week to respond.
I also employ play as a way to establish trust with my students early in the semester. A little anecdote, a few years ago, I was lamenting the staleness of teaching the same course over and over to a professor from grad school. And she said, well, Megan, what would you think is fun? And I thought, I can have fun in my own course, which I realize sounds ludicrous, but I didn't think about that. But I had kind of lost the newness of what I was doing. So I started to think about how I could recreate and replicate the face-to-face experience for my online students. For example, space, time, and energy in choreography. In class, we'd explore time by, you know, raising our hands up for 16 counts in the classroom and putting them down on 1, or raising them for 8 and taking 32 counts to put your arms down, and talking about duration and musicality. And I thought, well, how can I do this for my online students? I thought, I don't have bodies, I have one body. So I got my daughter's Lego figures and made this really ridiculous, informative video about proximity and distance and time, and kind of played the fool a little bit. And I think it was really successful. And then that helped my students, I think, have a little bit of trust when I asked them to move their own bodies and make a short exploratory video for me, because I don't think they would have done it if I hadn't already put myself out there and taken that risk with them. Even though I'm supposed to be their leader, it still felt a little silly for me. But then, Mindy, when you're talking about your home and sharing that with your students, when they sent these videos in, they were very honest and revealing, because I see where they live, and I see the people they live with and their cats and their pets. And I know that creating a movement video is very specific to dance, but it was fun. I was excited to grade it. Having work come in a different format that's not typed was exhilarating. I couldn't wait to sit down to grade, and I thought, this is fun. When I am looking forward to reading their work and I want to grade it, that's a wonderful thing.
Yes.
One thing I think works really well with online classes, if it is very organized so that students don't get scared once they see it. And I've worked hard the last few years, and it really helped when we had to transition online. I was exhausted, but trying to convert, I tried to make it the way I make the online classes, where it's very clear from the moment you open it. I've got 3 big buttons. Start here will take you exactly where you have to go if you need to know, how do I get to the textbook? How do I get to the next assignment? All the links are in order by week. So students just, I have tried to make it as, please forgive me, but as stupid proof as possible, so that somebody that's not comfortable, never done anything online, all they have to do is push a button and it'll take them to the instructions for the next assignment, or to link them to the textbook assignment, or whichever one I'm using. And I think the students usually really like it. if I start an online class that way, they get very used to it very quickly. Switching a class that expected to be face-to-face, it helped, I think, calm some of the anxiety. I don't usually do any in-person meetings for an online class. I will occasionally, I feel more comfortable doing it in writing. If somebody has a question, I post an answer for everybody. If there's a question that I think a million people will have, I'll go, hey, new announcement. For those of you having trouble with this, this is the answer. And here's a link to fix it. So I try to check in every day, make sure I'm keeping up to date. The faster you come up with your grading, the easier it is. And the way I try to get them to connect, I love discussion boards. So even the in-class, face-to-face classes always get 5 discussions a year where they go in, and I teach psychology. So there's usually, but you got to be careful. So it's like there's a personal element. You can give a very personal opinion and experience. You don't have to. You can take an example from a movie, a book, or what you made up, but it gives them an opportunity to give both a academic response that is based on the material, because they are required to support any arguments or opinions they give, but it gives them an opportunity to give a little bit of themselves in it as well. And then they have to comment on at least 2 other posts, and they get graded on the comments as well. So any comment has to be properly supported. Like, I disagree with you because this. So I try to keep it so they give a little bit of themselves, and they're also getting an academic grade on the whatever, they have to give it academic support to make sure they're understanding the material. But it seems to, it's probably, I'm interested in what other people are doing, because I'm thinking, oh, I like that orientation. I think maybe I'll do that, because that's a nice way to give some extra credit points and get them a chance to ask me questions in real time. And I did meet in real time with classes. I just kept Zoom meetings open when we transitioned online. And what I noticed is, I'm curious, by the time we were getting towards the end of the semester, nobody was showing up, but I was there, so.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kim.
And I find you're right. Organization is vital to the success of students in a particular course. When I look at some successful strategies that I use in class, I'm looking at successful strategies that makes them want to respond to a discussion board. And I find that when I somehow relate it to an opinion of theirs, an opinion on an issue, then they are more likely to respond. Say, for example, if we're looking at genetics, genetic disorders, maybe Fragile X syndrome, which happens to be one of the more common inherited genetic disorders that affects intellectual disability. I want them to understand Fragile X syndrome, but if I ask them something like, there are some individuals that want students tested to determine whether or not they have this Fragile X chromosome. Are you in favor of the testing? Are you against the testing? And it doesn't matter to me if they are in favor or against. What I really want them to understand is the genetic disorder. So they have to first describe it and take a side. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what I like is, if I give them an opinion, I like giving opinion because I get really interesting, rich answers. Mm-hmm. And if I say, hey, you have to support it, just explain what's the argument for and against giving an opinion, for this opinion versus that opinion. Because it's nice because sometimes it actually will spark a bigger discussion within the group, which I like to, because I go, oh, I don't mind if I'll only up your grade if you respond to more than 2 people. So seeing an argument where it's like, no, I disagree with you there. It's an interesting way of using the material, makes it more meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're more likely to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Deborah, please.
They are more likely to engage, I think, when they're allowed to express their opinion that way. Then if they're really not interested in the subject, then they're not going to engage as
And you get
much.
some people that barely, you know, they do enough to get the assignment done. But I've gotten some really, really interesting discussions over the last several years. So it's nice, and students usually comment that they like those. So.
Okay, so the next question that I'd like to pose to our four panelists is kind of the flip side of that coin, which is there anything that you've tried regarding online student engagement that perhaps didn't work out the way that you hoped it would or thought it would? And of course, why do you think it didn't work?
Well, I'll go ahead, Mindy,
Go ahead,
because I
Pam.
think we've discussed this before. For the transition from my on-site class to my online class, they had started working on a group project that's a fourth of their grade. And so I wanted to continue that. So I started using collaborative in Canvas, and I was not familiar with it. And so I incorporated it into the class. And it was my first time using it, students' first time using it. It didn't flow well. It was a flop. And there was a lot, and this was right at the height of us closing, and I had some students who were working for Walmart and doing all kinds of things. And so they had met in class, and it was hard for me to get them to join a Zoom group session where I could put them in breakout rooms because they had different things going on. And I had to readjust my grading criteria for that, because this is something that included a PowerPoint presentation, included a discussion, and usually included a 3D product that they make with the makerspace. Well, I had to X that because that was no longer available. And then, but they had to all participate, and that did not work. So why didn't it work? I wasn't as familiar with the tool that I needed to be, and I don't think the students were, and I was trying something new with them when they were many of them had never taken an online class before, believe it or not, and I thought they were just going to pick this up because they're a younger generation and can get it, and it just didn't work. So I'm trying to incorporate a way now where if I have to transition that, I can more easily transition it, but using Teams instead of collaboration. I need to get more familiar with collaborations before I use it again, but I'm familiar with Teams. So I'm going to use what I'm familiar with so I can better direct instead of all the problems that I caused last semester. So, and I think we've talked about this, Mindy, before.
Yeah, because I too had to transition from the face-to-face to online because we do team-based learning. So they were working on a game project that would be a review for the whole class, and they had, generated questions. They'd done all this stuff, and we had to just change horses midstream because there's no way, because that was a physical product, right? So I changed that. I had to change all of their assignments because they would go out and experience the humanities in the world, right? And then I had to do all the research to figure out what's going on virtually, to pass that along, and it was just crazy. But those are not online students. Those are face-to-face students, and they're a different breed. And so that was a totally different consideration for me. When I first started teaching online, I had them doing journals and just weekly discussions, and I lost half the class just like that because there was just too much. And over time, I found the balance a little better about their time, and instead of having so many, I made them, deepening, so that was, it's not just respond to somebody, but respond to their response to you, to back and forth, instead of just the hit and run. That when you have weekly discussions, that's just so much to ask of them. So I did learn to value their time management. And so, like I said, I leave tests open longer. I leave discussions open longer. And that I think has been a good help. And I also, want them to have not just engagement with one another, but engagement with me and engagement with the content. So in trying to work through that, I use rubrics for everything, but I know, and turning them into Canvas rubrics is really tricky because they were way too detailed. So I had to really distill them, but I love the rubrics because you get every single criterion, you have a chance to comment and make it, here's what you did great on that, here's a suggestion to improve that. So it's not just that I'm going click, click, click and, speed grading, but it gives an opportunity to really break it down and give them feedback. So I think engagement with the content, I think it's important that they do some of the generation of that, like I said before. And I have a gallery of excellence that I have collected over all the years that I share with them, and they aspire to that. They see some of it, and a lot of times it's hard for them to understand why they didn't make an A, or why, because they only see their work. So when they see other people's work and they see what excellence really looks like, I think it's a game changer. And I see them improve a lot throughout the semester, I think just based on that mostly.
All right. I think we're looking at student engagement that didn't work. I did this project. I've done some projects in the classroom that I then want to transfer onto online, and I was very excited about this one. We were doing posters for Hispanic Heritage Month celebrations. They were researching Hispanic leaders in sciences, and I always had in the classroom very good participation from the students. So I thought, I'm going to move this online. And I was very disappointed. There was participation, but not a whole lot. And so I started thinking about, why was it not as well received online as in the classroom? And when I asked my students, some of them mentioned the fact that when they had to build their trifold poster boards, then they had to bring those to campus so that I could display them. And somehow, if they were online and they were not coming to campus, they weren't going to make that special trip to bring the board. So I'm going to have to rethink that project because I think it is important, but I need to somehow get more students involved in that. Same thing happened with health and safety fair. Students on campus are always willing to attend campus activities when they're on site, but when they're online, they don't come to these activities as much. So I need some help there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you're probably not alone in trying to take something that worked really well in the face-to-face class and thinking, oh, sure, it'll work fine online too. And that is definitely not always the case.
Yeah, because I thought, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go for it, Pam.
Well, no, I was just saying what you were just following up on that, because I thought, okay, instead of just a boring PowerPoint, these students would use their social media, maybe even do a TikTok on the presentation. I have no idea how to do that, but I know they're doing it. So I just left it wide open. And they were still like, they were at loss. Nah, I couldn't tell them how to do a TikTok. I was like, just be creative. And it just, number one, it was online versus on-site, having to go online. Mm-hmm. So they had less prep, I had less prep. But my assumptions is what got me in trouble.
Oh. That is a great realization to have, a really important realization to have. Assumptions can get us in trouble a lot.
I think one of the things that she said that has happened to me before, we have this assumption that they have these tech skills, that they, just because they know how to use social media does not make them, digital natives, right? And so we do have this assumption that we're going to just use this technology and they can just pop into it. And we have to learn it too, which, that's hard. But so that's why I think it's important to kind of pick your platform and so that they don't have to spend the whole semester just learning new technologies.
Yeah.
You can have too many whistles and bells.
Yeah, absolutely. Megan, what about you? Do you have any flops you want to share with us?
Oh, sure. Most recently, as I think Pam mentioned, this semester I tried collaborations and decided to use Google Docs, which seemed like a great idea until I realized that I didn't change the settings to anyone that the link can view. So if a student didn't want to use their Collin account, then I was getting all of these requests at my personal email account from students who wanted to access the Google Doc from their personal account. So I thought I had fixed all of that, but still there were some hiccups. One thing that I did love about it is that I could go in and make comments while they were working if they chose to work on the project before the day before. And so I could make all those comments and then they could go in and resolve them. However, since this was something new in light of COVID, I didn't tell them I was going to go in and make comments. So some of them maybe didn't see the comments until the last minute, but then I had also made collaborations in Google Docs optional. So some students chose to work with Word, so I didn't get to see their project. So there was a discrepancy in terms of the quality of work because the students whose work I had access to give feedback to early in the process, they did really well. And then the students who were working privately, because I couldn't see their document, I ended up returning a lot of those and saying, I'd like for you to resubmit given this feedback. And then the comment about assuming that students are tech savvy, exactly, I would make comments in the Word doc with the editing feature and I would return it and they would say, I can't see any comments. And I was just flabbergasted thinking, well, surely if I know how to do this, which is completely an erroneous assumption. And so I need to table the assumptions that I make about my students' ability to navigate technology.
So I want to say one more thing about collaborations that I found out last semester the hard way. First of all, some of them had not been using their @Collin. So, and they hadn't set up their Microsoft. They hadn't activated any of it. And so I was trying to get them set up in the class, and it turns out that some that were going to UNT, where they also have a Microsoft account, that the accounts were getting cross-wired, and it was a nightmare. And I had just said, you can do whatever you want. You can use Zoom, you can use Google Docs, you can do whatever you want. So I had to take myself out of that part of the process. And like Megan was saying, when they can't get your feedback, then, it's just sink or swim on their own. So I think it's important that we really kind of drill down and figure out what those problems are before. And I know you can't know what you don't know, but yeah, after that I talked to the ELC and they had no idea that was a problem.
Yeah, thank goodness for the ELC, right?
No.
Yes.
What would we do without them? I shudder to think about it.
A lot less is what
right. Absolutely. I am, for those of you who have been posing questions in the chat, I'm making note of them. Don't worry, we'll get to them. But I want to make sure I have a few more questions for our panelists, and then we'll open it up a little bit more for Q&A. So the next question that I want to pose, we've kind of been talking about things that have been challenging to us, like the technology piece and knowing what our students know and don't know and things like that. So I kind of want to skip ahead with the time that we have to ask about any specific tools that you have found to be particularly helpful in getting your students actively involved. Are there things that you would really recommend to our attendees today? And why?
I will say that I do recorded lectures so the students can hear my voice, and often comments that I get in their feedback and in their evaluations is that they appreciate that there's actually somebody behind, the course. So I also, not often, but when I detect a frustration from a student's point of view, I contact the student or ask them when we're on campus, ask them to stop by when they can. Sometimes when I answer a message, if it's a short little message, I'll just record my voice. And I think hearing us sometimes helps. So I started using, I was using YouTube before January. In January, when we made the move to Microsoft Office products, started using Stream and find that tool to be very user-friendly for recording, for videos.
Yeah.
And so that's one tool that I would recommend if you
But
wanted
once
to record.
again, if they haven't set up their Microsoft account, now you have a problem because they can't see those, right? Everybody can see YouTube. So I went to Stream and then I went back to YouTube because I didn't want to deal with helping them activate their Microsoft. That was most of my semester last semester was Microsoft craziness.
Well, I too use Stream, Deborah, because I like the transcript that it provides. I like being able to see how many actually watched my lecture, you know. And then when they say, Mindy, sometimes they've said, well, I can't see this. How do I get to it? Yeah, I've had to go back to ELC and say, okay, so I would copy and paste a little instruction. You have access to Stream right here, and kind of give directions. I was very redundant about it. That was a little frustration, but it also helped with the closed captioning of it. And
very much so, yes.
But yes, as someone was saying here, Canvas Studio, I just learned about that during this last spring, summer, whatever. And so I'm planning on using that as well. That way I don't have to record in Zoom, then upload in Stream, and then put it into there. So I'm kind of jumping ahead, but something that I'm planning on using in the future. But Deborah, they like the Stream, and then what I would do again, I would give extra credit to those who would be online with me when I had the lecture, if they could, so that they could ask any questions and so forth. Only problem is that, it started off good and then it ended up being like one student, then one student said, am I the only one here? This is awkward. I said, yes, it's a private lesson, so feel honored. Anyway, so I like Stream for that reason, but yeah, I'm gonna try the Canvas Studio as well.
Thanks, Pam. What else? Other tools?
So Megan, I'm interested in what you have, because you have to do video, right? So what have you tried out different tools and found that one works better than another? Because I have a list of them now, like Flipgrid and all of that I haven't tried out. So I'm curious what you've tried.
In the spring, when my studio movement courses moved online, I heavily relied on Zoom to record it and then upload it, as y'all said, to Stream and OneDrive. I hesitated to use YouTube, one, because it's an external site, but two, some of my students took the class synchronously and I needed to have an asynchronous option. And instead of redoing the entire class with just me, you could see some of the students in the video from the Zoom that was recorded, so I couldn't put it on YouTube in terms of privacy. So I needed to have it password protected in Stream because, of course, when you upload, it's visible by default to the entire college, which I immediately thought, the entire college does not need to see me dancing in my living room with my students.
Yes, we do.
The continuing education students in my class do not have access to Stream or OneDrive, was my understanding in the spring, and I put this concern forward. So then I had to find another way to get it to the batch of CE students, because if I am correct, it was not the intention of the college to hook them up through Microsoft and the collin.edu emails. So if you have non-traditional students that aren't credit seeking in your courses, there's another layer of complications to sharing class videos with them, especially if you have other students visible in the video and there's that FERPA concern. So I enjoyed Zoom, although also if you have back-to-back classes, for an hour movement class to load, there's hardly enough time on your device for that to download so that you can start a new Zoom. So sometimes brevity is key if you're trying to have a synchronous option for students who want to be in class on Tuesdays at 1, for example. So it was a little tricky, but I cannot at this time recommend a new piece of technology, but that's how I dealt with it in the spring.
Yeah, I found out that about Zoom the hard way, that it takes forever to convert. And I was just, shaving seconds off the clock, trying to get from one to another. And, I was late a couple of times to my second class because it would not open. Oh. And I either lost the recording and just said stop, or, so live and learn.
Gosh, that's honestly something I never would have even thought about, but that's kind of a big deal.
It is.
Speaking of tools, I just want to mention this to everybody who's here today. Before I forget, I have posted on the CTL website, on the online teaching best practices page, a document that has a list of mostly free, or at least extremely cheap tools that can be used for online teaching activities in some way. Some of them are for getting students engaged. Some are things that can make your job easier as an instructor. I have them categorized by things like collaboration tools or discussion tools and things like that. I will say this with the caveat that I have not necessarily used all of them myself, but I have provided brief descriptions and links to them if you want to check them out. So that might be of some interest to all of you at some point later. And I'll put a link to that page in here.
So if you hit a snag, don't email Allison. Allison, what am I supposed to do, right?
No, I am not saying I'm an expert on any of them. I'm just
I got you
with some ideas.
Thank you for the resource.
Just one more tool that I think every discipline can use, and that's Poll Everywhere. And it's pretty simple, and it's free, and they get immediate results, and they can see. So they love to express their opinions, and that's a great way to get them to do it.
Yes,
absolutely. Anonymously, right? They don't have to say who said what.
Right. That's good.
And there is a link to Poll Everywhere on the document that I just described, as well as things like Flipgrid and Padlet, and all the Microsoft tools, all the Google tools, all kinds of things that even I hadn't learned about, but that I didn't know about, but have learned from some other faculty on this campus and other colleagues that I have.
Allison, I want you to talk about Padlet for a second, because I thought that was amazing, and it was so user friendly.
Yeah, so Padlet is it's a really cool tool. It's kind of like an online bulletin board that you can use for your class. I used it in the last webinar that I did on assessment as kind of just a place for everybody to share ideas for assessment, some cool exams or assignments or other kinds of assessment ideas or tools that they have used, because anybody can create a free account. That's all I did. And students can post text, they can post images, they can post videos, or links to other websites there. And there are different ways that you can organize it as well. And you can respond or react to what other people have posted. So it can be a fun kind of brainstorming site, or it could be a way, I've used it, I've known people who've used it for like those student introductory pieces at the beginning of a course. You can have students post a little video of themselves, or a selfie or something like that, where they say something about themselves. So it's really user friendly, like Mindy said. I really like it a lot. That's also
How is it different
on the
than,
form.
how's it different from like being able to post a video of yourself in an introductory discussion?
It's not necessarily hugely different. It's just kind of, it's pretty simple. I think that's the beauty of it. It's just everything is in little boxes on the same screen. You give everybody a link to that page and they upload it. It's super easy. It's one of those things, like if I can use it, I feel like other people can probably figure it out too.
Okay.
Because I'm not a tech genius.
Because it was so easy, I'm going to use it in the fall for the class to find their favorite artwork and post it, and just do a collage of everybody's favorite art.
It's great for being a gallery. Yeah.
Right.
Class collage would be a good project. What's the name of that page that you said that's on the teaching?
So if you go to the CTL website, you'll see in the side navigation, there's a link that says best practices for online teaching. That's where I'm posting all of the links of the webinar recordings as well. And so the recordings are at the top, and then if you scroll down a little bit, you will find the document that I've posted there, as well as some other printable documents. And I will put a link to this page and the CTL page in the chat here in just a second. So, man, this hour has gone by so fast. I cannot believe it. I want to make sure, we didn't really get to our next question about things that you're thinking about trying, but if it's okay with you all, I'd like to open it up for some Q&A with our attendees.
So Allison, I want to say the things that we're going to try, I'm going to answer it really quickly. That document that you sent, I'm trying it. It's amazing.
It's like four pages long, so you know, remember the too much piece. Don't overwhelm anyone.
No, I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for me. That's playtime.
Allison, I want to respond to a question that was asked about Lockdown Browser, because that's one of the other things that I used that didn't work for me. Was especially for my students who were transferring from on-site to online right as we were having the midterm exam. And so I had seen Lockdown Browser on the web page, and I thought that it was part of supported by ELC, after finding out no, it was not. But anyway, it caused a problem. It didn't work because, number one, you have to download something to the computer. And I had students who were using computers, other people's computers, or there was only one computer in the house, or it was a public computer. And so then, you know, again, flexibility was crucial during this time period. So I had to be flexible on, you know, the number of attempts that they could have and so forth. And after a while, I just said, you know what, we're not going to do this for the final exam, because I only had the midterm and final exam, because it caused too many problems. I had to learn how to teach them how to download it. And then, but the fact that they had to download it. And then when they had problems, they could not contact the e-learning center because it was not something, I didn't know that, you know, until afterwards. So I'm going to try the honor lock system for upcoming year, because I need to keep the integrity of the exams and so forth for our students. I haven't tried that before, but I want to do that. So anyway, I noticed in the chat the question about the lockdown. It just didn't work for me, and it didn't work for my students. And I find if it's causing them too many issues and problems, scrap it, you know.
Yeah. That the issue of proctoring services in general is something that we kind of talked a little bit about during the last webinar, and I think your response is pretty typical. Like, nothing works for everybody, and so it's kind of a mixed bag, right?
Right.
So a couple of questions that popped up in the chat earlier that I want to make sure get asked. Stephen asked a question about what are some best practices for, I guess, what you publish for your students online at first so that they don't get overwhelmed but still want to engage. Stephen, let me know if I'm misrepresenting your question.
No, that's perfectly correct.
Okay, great.
I try to keep a really clean look on my modules page. So of course it's organized by week, but then all of the things I nest under each week have very brief titles. So it would be read, submit, complete. And then once they click it, it has more detail. I mean, it might say read, the choreographer, but then it's not until they click it that everything's nested in that new page, because I feel like if I put read, the choreographer, and then the title and the author and all that, it clouds the field of vision. So I really try to keep a very minimal aesthetic on my modules page that then they can click for more information. And each week has a start here that would have it, so I don't put it in announcements, but I put it in start here for that week so they don't have to go somewhere else to get information about that week.
Yeah, you make a good point, Stephen, because I have a Start Here module that has different categories. How do you upload an assignment? What's the general guidelines for discussion? A reminder of my late policy. But then I realized once they get started with the discussion, that's a lot of stuff. And many times they just breeze over, okay, what's my assignment? Because I also have the weekly modules. But in the weekly modules, I'll say, this is a goal, here are the learning activities, and here are your learning assignments. You know, I've polished that. But in my feedback to the students, if they're not following the general guidelines for the discussion, which is a major thing that I have to remind them of after grading discussion 1, or during the course of grading for each student, I'll say, you know, good comment about blah, 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 but you needed to make sure you address all points, and to maximize your points, make sure you watch the word count and blah, blah, blah. You need to respond. And then at the end, after I finish grading all the discussion, then I give an announcement, weekly announcement. I finished grading discussion 1. If you have any questions, make sure we follow the instructions, just kind of a general reminder, even though I've told specific students what they needed to do. I found that individual feedback to students about how can I improve on the next discussion, that pushes me to grade discussion 1 before they get to discussion 2, because how will they know what I want if I haven't given them the feedback? And this can be rather tedious if it's a large class with 50 students. You know, Wendy, I don't know how in the heck you were doing that, you know, with 17 I don't know how many discussions you had, but anyway, I give that some consideration when I'm looking at my discussions. And because the discussions, again, can be based on content and opinion, I limit the word count, because some people like to go on and on and on and on. And I have to make sure that their ideas are heard, but they also frame it in a way that shows me, you've learned something from the class. This isn't just something that you can just bring in and we talk about at Chili's. This is here and now. Show me that you've learned, you know. So I think that too much at the beginning can be a problem, but having it there, I can always redirect them back, but giving them feedback is crucial too. I agree, Stephen. It's too much for me to read sometimes, you know. So, but I like to have a trail, and I always say, go back home, where it says start here, you know.
Okay, we have one more question that I want to make sure gets asked. Teddy asked specifically of Mindy, are students required to make their initial posts before they can see what others have posted, or are they allowed to see other posts as they go along, and how does that work?
Yes, so they're always, they can't see anybody else's until they posted their own. Keeps them honest. and they don't get primed, they don't get suggestibility, issues. And they're, those are their thoughts and their ideas that get posted. And then after that, it's back and forth all over the place. But I think it's important. I think that's a really important thing. So you don't have to be on the lookout for plagiarism or, in discussions, it's different. You don't have to turn it in. So.
Yeah. Another question, there's been some discussion in the chat about this, but I want to make sure the panelists know about it. There's a question from Tala about what's a reasonable number of discussions to have? She's asking specifically about in a 5-week summer course, but do you have any guidelines that help you determine how many discussions to have?
So I do 3 in the short semester in the summer. And then there are 6 in longer semesters. So, I set mine up not week by week, but I chunk it, here's, creativity, and, here's the ancient world, and here's, so we move
organized
through
by
that.
units.
By units, but I always label the assigned readings and videos. I always label that, week 1, day 1 in summer session, so that they know exactly and they can move through. And they don't really have dates because I don't want to have to redo that every year and figure out how many places I have dates to fix, right? But yeah, and then I gamified my class so that it's all points, and so you're accumulating points throughout. And so and they have a get out of jail free card, so they can turn in 1 free, late assignment that's no penalties or anything on it, and everything else, no. So I have to leave the modules open, but I don't want them to have to scroll. So when we're done with that unit, I just drag it down to the bottom of the queue so that they can still get to it, but it's not, they don't have to scroll past it.
Oh, that's a great idea. Okay, I hate to say this, everybody, but we are officially over our time today. I have a feeling we could keep having this great discussion for a couple more hours at least, but as we were talking about time management and being sensitive to everybody's time, I want to make sure that we're doing that here. I've put the link to the CTL website that I talked about in the chat, but I'm going to put it here again for all of you. If it helps, just go to the teaching and learning link in your faculty tab, and it'll get you there. It's also in my email for those of you who got the email from me with the link in it. It's at the bottom of my signature. So I just want to say, my gosh, thank you so much to these amazing faculty panelists who have shared some great knowledge and expertise and experiences with us today. I think we're all coming away with some really great ideas, things to try, things to bear in mind as we're planning for the fall, maybe some things to avoid potentially. We can't really give you a round of applause on Zoom, I don't know, but I'll give you some jazz hands in its place. Megan the dancer hopefully will appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you everybody for being here and for all of your great questions. This is again our final webinar for July, but I want y'all to know I am working on planning my programming for the fall. We'll likely do a lot more webinars, so be on the lookout for that. And as always, please don't hesitate to contact me, reach out to me via email or phone call or whatever if you have any questions about anything or have any ideas that you want to share. I'm always happy to hear about the things you guys are interested in. So thank you, Mindy, Deborah, Pam, and Megan for everything today. I will get this recording uploaded pretty quickly, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Allison.
You're so welcome.
Thanks, everyone, for attending.